Morning. Yeah, I may steal this film with a group of friends, and also steal this film too. And I guess what I want to talk about is what we found interesting about steal this film, and maybe some other people have been interested in the project and what we learned from it. And I guess I'll try to talk you through some of those things and some of the ideas we have about the way things are going. So what was unique about our project? Well, yeah, you always hear how many times it's been downloaded. The truth is we don't know exactly how many times. We know that it's many millions. We don't know much more than that. Something like someone once said 5.5 million. I don't know where they got that figure from, but you can use that one if you like. But we don't necessarily think that the question of number is the most important thing about Steal This Film. Even almost what's in the film is not the most important thing about Steal This Film. We feel that, at least I feel that, what set us apart from what the people are doing is the way we approach pirate infrastructure. We kind of looked at our opportunities, the opportunities that are out there in terms of distributing media, and realized that, here's this force, peer-to-peer, BitTorrent, and here are these entities that are global brands with massive reach. Pirate Bay, Mininova, with figures like now 14 million unique users a day on Pirate Bay, more on Mininova. And so we really, at some point, thought, well, this is an insane situation where these people are treated as if, at the very best, in the discourse that will be shared here, they're the kind of guilty secret of Creative Commons, or somehow the unnamed third party. And we felt that this is a real missed opportunity for people who want not only to download interesting films, but to have their own films downloaded, to exercise the right to be shared. So we approached Pirate Bay, and the first thing we did was really approach them as one would approach a major distribution corporation. Not that I would, and not that we ever would have approached a commercial corporation to distribute our work. They certainly wouldn't distribute Steal This Film, and I think that's relevant. We went to Pirate Bay, we wined and dined them, we charmed them, and we took them seriously, and as a result, the kinds of numbers I think that you hear about are not, without wanting to display false modesty based on the content of the film, but rather on the strategy of taking those people seriously as distribution mechanisms. And for some reason, again and again, filmmakers ask how we did this, and I tell them again and again how it was done, and they never do it. It's kind of, well, at first I was thinking, if I tell people, then they'll do it, and then I won't be able to do that anymore. That trick will be done. Well, no, that's 2 years now, and nobody else has done it. And so the second thing, what people always ask us about with Steal This Film is the business model. They wonder how much money did we make, or on the other hand, how much money did we lose? I had a long conversation the other day with a guy at a film festival who was the guy who distributed Morgan Spurlock's films, Super Size Me. And he was saying, but you didn't collect any emails at least? You've got 4 million downloads and you didn't even collect people's emails? I mean, I can understand if you really didn't want to make them pay, but surely you could have made them give you something. And you just couldn't make him understand this idea of frictionlessness, of not requiring anything. It can be on any tracker, anywhere. We distribute it freely. We count SneakerNet as being just as important as BitTorrent. You showing it in your own home, you showing it in a local cinema. These are all legitimate forms of distribution. Although I've drawn the line at major film festivals showing it without asking. That upsets me, that's the only thing. Singapore Film Festival headlined it without telling us, and when I wrote to them, they said, but it's called Steal This Film. I'm like, yeah, this is by now old. So this is to say, we don't necessarily want to answer the question directly, what is the business model of Steal This Film, because we don't think it's a business. It's not an open business. I see it in the open business prospectus. We certainly don't think about it that way. We kind of, on the other hand, are, obviously as real people who are not rich, in a kind of fight about this question of making money. Obviously, if you have a film which is downloaded all these millions of times, it kind of sharpens the mind about why should we be making money from this, and what would be the right way to, should we be attributed in a different way, should we be charging, how should we, these questions are raised and raised again. And so I think I'm not wrong in thinking this is something that many people here are talking about and thinking about. And so we certainly feel connected via having distributed a film which has reached kind of mass figures, and yet made very little money, about $30,000 in donations, connected to this question of how does one share and distribute work using these new means, using these new technologies, and manage this idea of making a living or making some kind of money. But on the other hand, we're against the idea that making money depends on managing your rights. You know, we're not into rights management, and I think we made that statement very clear, and that's not an option for us. So we see ourselves as in a struggle with others and with ourselves as the League of Noble Peers. People say we're reticent about answering questions. We're not reticent, we just often don't know the answers. We're inside this thing, in this strange group that made this strange film, and we really have no idea. We're just experimenting and trying to go forward in a way that involves lots of internal discussions. And we think what's happening to us is that, having released this film through pirate networks, we've understood that we've begun to be transformed by that experience, so our work is transformed by piracy, and it's quite clear that the pirates are being transformed by us. They now take us seriously. They want to work with us on other films. We'd love to make a fiction feature to distribute through BitTorrent. I'm trying to find an investor insane enough to see that that's an historical proposition. You know, not through YouTube, not through a portal, free to be shared, and then we'll work out how to do the rest after that. And that means that this question of piracy versus business is just a false opposition, because in the end it's a question of piracy becomes business, business becomes piracy, and I think that's already not a controversial thing to say. By the time this struggle is finished, the two will be merged, and we have to just try to make sure that it's merged in our favor. When the battle is won. And so, one of the things I want to say, because it can't be said clearly enough, is when we're asked about Steal This Film, when we're at film festivals, when we're talking on panels and so on, it's always presented to us as if the situation of the current media situation is presented as if currently artists are compensated fairly, or in the previous order they've been compensated fairly, and now piracy arrives, and how will everyone be compensated like they have been? And I think it bears saying that artists are not currently, and have not been, compensated fairly for their work. As anybody knows who tries to make a living from cultural production of cultural works, most people never make a cent, and you know, to make a living is a hopeless dream for most artists. And so we feel that posing the situation in that way means that you have to answer a different set of questions, a more limited set of questions, which is not how do we pay for the big works, it's always the question of how will you make Spider-Man, how will you make Batman 2, but could we imagine a system, could we imagine a world in which a greater number of very small artists could make cultural production part of their everyday life, part of one of the things that they do to live. I say this because if you begin by accepting the premise that the copyright industries, the MPAA, the RIA, and so on, always put out, which is that they're protecting the little guy. It's always the same thing. We need this because this protects individual rights, protects creativity. And kind of accepting that as a premise makes you answer a whole set of questions. If you're thinking about this idea of open business, if you accept that category, question to answer a whole set of questions that maybe don't need to be answered. So just really quickly, these are sort of our working premises. The files are down. If you watch Steal This Film too, you'll understand this is part of the argument. All the files are down. There's no up anymore. It's all across. Everything's out there. You have to deal with this fact. There is no license for these territories, by which I mean this massive infrastructure operates, the peer-to-peer infrastructure, operates entirely outside of any legal jurisdiction. It operates autonomously. It kind of responds in a slow way to the law, or it moves, but it operates, as it were, parallel or in an untidy relationship with the law. And to say it again, this is the best media distribution system we've produced. And that's exciting, and that's what's important. That we could do this, that we could make Steal This Film and distribute it this way is what's important. And so, what I want to, in this context, what I want to briefly do in the last few minutes that I have, this is sort of going to take a few minutes, is describe one of the big things to come out of Steal This Film is that we receive donations, many donations from many people, and anybody who's interested in the details of that can ask me. Anybody who's interested in experimenting with these models, I'm happy to respond. What we wanted to do was design a system that makes it easier for artists to receive donations, for people to receive donations online. And that system is called Vodo. There's some rough designs for that. The alpha of this is built. It stands for voluntary donations. And I'm proposing this to you because I'd be really interested in hearing your feedback on the idea. It's based on the premises that I gave you. The idea is this. The files are out there. They're in the peer-to-peer networks. They're in the BitTorrent networks. So we don't need to recreate a place where people can take donations. What we need to do is extend an infrastructure out into the file sharing networks where people who are downloading, people who are sharing, people who are uploading can make donations right from the point where they consume the media, right from the point where they download, right from the point where they share. And so what we're building is a lookup table which has PayPal details or payment details of any kind and hashes of works on the other side. It's really very simple. And that will be open and accessible by anyone. And so, for example, the Pirate Bay implements that. Every file in the Pirate Bay that has an entry in our system will then have a donation link. And any other tracker which implements it will have a donation link, and so on and so on. So it's a simple lookup infrastructure. We see this as a kind of moral rights and attribution-based compensation system. I hate the word compensation because it always suggests that something's been lost and has to be compensated. But it's a moral rights donation system that, via your right to be attributed as the creator of a work, lets you receive donations voluntarily. We've built this, and we have a great relationship with people like the Pirate Bay and Unova and so on and so on. Nothing's been signed. I don't think anything would be signed, but somehow the idea is to go forward and see if we can implement this inside the existing peer-to-peer infrastructure. And I think that in itself is kind of interesting, possibly exciting. But what I want to ask you about, and I invite you to come and tell me what you think, is that obviously people say, and I think it's perfectly correct, that people need an incentive to donate. We receive $30,000 in donations, and that's great. But smaller artists, people with smaller works that don't gain so much profile, maybe it's going to be harder for them. And so a number of ideas have come up about how you would incentivize people to donate. And, one of them has been quite the subject of real argument amongst us, and I figured, well, it's not a usual thing to do when you're starting a new project to sort of explain your strategy to a random group of people or a more or less uncontrolled group of people. But I'm really interested in what you've got to say about it. So the proposal will be this, that as an artist, you could elect to receive 100% of any donation that you get through the system. But you could also elect to say, give 10% of your donation to everybody who donated to you before, so that if I get in early and I donate to one of your works and it's a small work, I can know that if your work then becomes popular, that over time I will make money from you. This gives me an incentive to do things like go and seek small works that may become popular, donate to them, blog about them, encourage other people to blog about them, share them, redistribute them, give them to friends. All these behaviors that we want to encourage, right? But of course, on the other hand, it's kind of dirty and pyramidic. It has this problem, it has this inherent problem. So I'm really curious to know what you guys think about that. What excites me about it is that it has the potential, we've built the infrastructure, that's simple, and this has the potential to get people doing things like following new artists, gaming, betting effectively on new artists, all the while, of course, supporting them. And I want to know if you think that's something we should be doing, or if you think that's dirty and the League of Noble Peers should stay away from such things. Finally, I'm doing really well for time. This pigeon thing. The reason I've got these pigeon slides up is because, you know, it's this question of once upon a time pigeons had a function. You know, they were messengers. They flew messages. In the war, people even used to attach cameras to them, believe it or not. They were used for aerial photography, and they had a life, they had a role. And now they just pick around, at least in London, they pick around in the streets looking through McDonald's leftovers. And you know, what I feel like when I'm answering questions about Steal This Film, when people are being outraged in audiences about me stealing filmmakers' lunches, I feel like saying to them sometimes, you know, it's like the pigeons in the end, you know, their role is just finished, and sometimes modes of distribution just die. Or they go to live in the corners of the world. And it's not really our responsibility as filmmakers or as technologists to look after the pigeons of this world. You know, they kind of look after themselves in the corners. And what I want to encourage you to do when you're thinking about new business models, if that's what you're thinking about, as I understand many people are talking about that, is don't think about the pigeons and don't feed them. You know, because it's this question of how you phrase the topic, how you phrase the questions you're trying to answer. You know, answer the questions that make sense to you. Answer the basic questions about how do we distribute, how do we survive, how do we help each other, how do we share. You don't have to answer the question, how do people make a recognizable business, an enterprise, you know, $100,000 a year. You just have to answer the questions that make sense to you in the way that make sense to you. And so this is my final comment. Don't feed the pigeons. You know, let's feed ourselves and feed our discussions in a way that makes sense to us. And I hope to have a chance to take these questions up with you directly. And I mean it. Anybody who has comments about Voda, please approach me and talk to me about it, because I'd be grateful for your intelligence. Thanks very much.